My name is Hopwood DePree, and while searching my ancestry, I discovered my family ties to a long-lost historic property. Now I'm helping other people to do the same.
Hello, I'm Hopwood DePree, and we are here at Hopwood Hall Estate in Middleton, England. And as we progress forward in our renovation of this historic old hall, we are uncovering many stories of the long-lost past. Today, I'm meeting with one of the descendants of my ancestors' biggest rivals that lasted for centuries.
Hundreds of years ago, our families, the Hopwoods and the Tetlows, were some of the main landowners in the area, and were also arch enemies. Compared to modern-day policing, law enforcement in the 14, 15, and 1600s was quite rudimentary. Towns and cities had volunteer watchmen and constables patrolling and enforcing the law, but the larger and more powerful families still felt the necessity to protect themselves.
So this is the original guards room, and if you were a guest coming to Hopwood Hall way back when, centuries and centuries ago, this is where you were to first come into the hall.
One of the ways the larger families would protect themselves would be by creating a guards room. The guards room at Hopwood Hall was built in 1690, and whenever guests would visit the hall, they would be checked for weapons, like swords or daggers, before they were allowed to meet with the family.
The fireplace showcases several lion heads as well as angry dogs. This is to signify danger, protection, and to be on your guard.
So a lot of this 1960s plasterboard is going to come off of the walls, and we're going to go back to what would have naturally been there, which will probably be brick and some lime mortar, but we'll see. As we tear it off, we'll see what's under there, and we'll work with what we have, because that's part of the fun and part of the process.
Hey Andrew.
Hi Hopwood.
How are you?
Pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming out here to Hopwood Hall.
You're welcome. Should we go up?
Yeah, let's go. Come on.
So this is my family tree. So on my family tree, it starts with me and goes through my dad, which is Geoffrey. Then it goes through his mother, who's a Wynard. It goes through her mother, Worthington. It goes through the Worthingtons, Halls, Bardsley, and then we hit the Tetlows.
So you must feel a strong connection to being from this area, and then also knowing your ancestors are from here. I mean, you must feel that on a daily basis.
It is fascinating when you sit there. I mean, my wife's been doing genealogy, and she's related to Hopwoods as well from the 1600s.
Is she really?
Yeah, she's a descendant of Elizabeth Hopwood. It shows how much family and the history of our families are connected to each other, and how much they echo down our line, not just in DNA, but in the way we behave. Even our mannerisms. You know, I sit there and I think, I've got some of my father's mannerisms, and I think, where's he got them from? Because he didn't get them from his dad, so you think, I bet he got it from his granddad. Well, where did his granddad get those mannerisms? And you think, oh, God, there's a guy in 1500s who's doing this on the table. And you think, that's where it starts. I think if we could go back in time and meet our ancestors, we'd recognise them instantly. Not by what they say, but by the way they move and the way their bodies work and everything. You sit there and go, yeah, that's one of mine.
So this is original brick dating to 1690. And what we have to do is remove all of this cement rendering that was put on in the 1960s. And each piece of this has to come off to let the brick breathe again. And that's very important in the health of a brick. So by peeling back all these alterations that were made in the 1960s, we are unearthing the beauty of the hall to see the historic fabric and the architecture to transform these spaces into welcoming hubs for the community. Once the guards allowed you to proceed into the main entry hall, you would approach an even larger fireplace. This has a family crest on it, and it also has a family heraldic animal, which is a white stag. The inscription by degrees is thought to be tracing back to the year 1513, when the Hopwood family were part of the Middleton Archers and were credited with helping to win the Battle of Flodden Field in the year 1513. In archery, the difference between hitting the bullseye or missing your target completely is simply by degrees. So I hear that you have some major information for me that connects to the Hopwood family.
So yes, right in the 1500s, your ancestors murdered one of my ancestors with a longbow. Is
Wait,
that right?
so that's your ancestor, because I
Yeah.
knew there was a murderer.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that that was your
That was
ancestor.
my ancestor. Was
Oh
shot.
my gosh.
Yeah. So,
Wow,
yeah,
what an incredible connection.
And that was the culmination of 300 years of vendettas.
I had heard that it was based on property.
Yeah.
I think back in those days, people didn't know if they had enemies, which they normally did. Their neighbors were often their enemies.
So it's always where the boundaries joined and who owned those boundaries and all the arguments around that. I know that my family regularly stole from the Traffords, from the Byrons, from the Hopwoods. They would do cow rustling. Because cows, you've got to remember, we lived in an agricultural society, were worth a lot of money.
It's so unfortunate that this happened, but there is a lot of history and unknown facts that Andrew and I need to work together to uncover. We can assume that probably your ancestors' land would have been just beyond that ridge.
Just beyond that ridge.
Wow. Is that amazing to think about that?
Yeah, well, certainly, because if you look at, you've got individual trees. You can see there's a tree on the ridge line there.
Right.
And they tended to use things like that to denote boundaries. So they can point to something and say, that's where we finish.
It's probably a good chance that your ancestors' land would have been just beyond that
and
ridge.
there's a good
over
chance
there.
my family would come over that ridge and steal your cows and off again.
So how long do you think this rivalry went on between our two families?
From what I believe, it started in the 1300s and it stretched right through into the 1600s. Towards the end of the 1600s, the Tetlows started to fall on hard times. So certainly my wife, who is a direct descendant of Elizabeth Hopwood from the 17th century, is a Hopwood. It's come down that way. So I suspect we've buried the hatchet in 2006 when I married my wife.
Now that we removed all the concrete rendering off the walls, the guards room and entry hall are in a position we can welcome in the public to host events, and through this, the hall starts to feel more alive and part of the community, something the Hopwood family always wanted.
You begin to realise you have a long family history, and it's not a weight that's on your shoulder. It's almost like a freedom, because you realise if they did wrong, you know, it doesn't matter if you've done wrong as well. You know, history will judge you if they want to judge you. And I don't judge them ill. I don't judge your family ill for killing a member of my family. It was just what they did back then. There wasn't the police, so they took it into their own hand.
That sense of discovery is so enlightening and so
Yeah.
exciting is what I find and have found. And the path that it can take you on is just life-changing.
Especially when you get a keystone figure, which tends to be heraldry or someone who's posh. And suddenly the whole world explodes on your family tree, and before you know it, you're related to everybody.
Just being with Andrew today really opened my eyes to the power of going through your family history and looking at maybe some of the disputes and unfortunate incidences that happened in the past. But there's no reason that those have to be carried forward into the future. So it feels great to be able to sit across from Andrew, to shake his hand, and to know that we've successfully bridged that gap of that feud that lasted for so many hundreds of years.